Hello everyone, this is Bentley, and today I wanted to do kind of a brief talk. A lot of you left some phenomenal comments on my interview with Ryan over at Hood Aquatics, and earlier this week, Gary Lang was in town speaking to the Greater Seattle Aquarium Society, and between your comments and some stuff that I heard in Gary's talk, I got some ideas about some stuff that I felt would be fun to talk about between you and I, and that is what sets great breeders or plant keepers, reef specialists, whatever it may be, apart from the rest of us. And don't take this as any kind of negative. This is more what lessons we can learn from what those people do to improve our own fish keeping hobby. So I'll start with breeding fish, because I'm not good at it. Plain and simple. Unless the fish is relatively easy to breed and does most of the work for me, I've never been super successful breeding fish. I've bred a few rainbow fish. I've raised lots of rainbow fish from eggs. I've bred plenty of guppies, but they do all the work for me. I've bred a few plecos, but I haven't really been a perpetual fish breeder. And you guys know that I have some limitations, but I've had a lot of failure. And when I listen to someone like Ryan, who in so few tanks is able to rather successfully raise a lot of fish, conversations that we have both on camera and off camera led me to think about a few things. So one of the first things I want to address is, space isn't an issue if you care enough. And what I mean is, if your goal is to breed fish, you will find ways to manufacture space inside even tanks with fish that are notorious for eating their fry, like rainbow fish. We saw Ryan saying in my interview with him that he uses little net boxes. And this could be similar using our hang-on breeder boxes or the Zis internal box. There's a lot of variations of this, but manufacturing that space in order to have space to raise babies to a size where they're safe and can go in with the same parents that are spawning them in a spawning mop. These types of things, finding these little tricks and tools, and some of them aren't really terribly expensive. Those net breeder boxes aren't that expensive. Sometimes you'll find the hang-on, like the Fluval, or I can't remember the other Chinese brand that makes one, but you can find them on Amazon. I'll have some links down below and stuff. But those kind of breeder boxes, you can find them on sale pretty regularly for a good price, so that you're not paying a ton in order to now all of a sudden have a bunch of spare space to protect your fry and start raising them up. So if you really want to breed these fish, you can. You're manufacturing space inside an already established tank where the parents are, so you know that the water quality should be good enough for the babies. It's just about now moving on to those next steps, ensuring you have food, and if you need to have more gentle flow around that, doing those kind of things to do the things necessary to create that space if you're constrained. If you only have 3 or 4 fish tanks, maybe you only have one, you can still breed fish. You just have to do a little, inside the box thinking, because you've got to put a box inside your glass box in order to raise those fry. But you just have to go a little bit more than just thinking that I have to have a raising tank, or that these fish have to be a fish that will raise up by the parents naturally. There are ways that we can raise baby fish if we really want to. Second, and this comes from listening to folks like Johannes Graf, Gary Lang, Rob McClure, if you're a Corridora fan, but basically a ton of extremely successful breeders. And this includes folks like Master Breeder Dean and Ryan as well. Live and frozen food. We can do a lot with powdered foods. We really can. Or things like your small granule size foods and stuff like that. But realistically, the better quality our food and the more reliably we're feeding our fish. Even if that's something like, instead of having one big feeding a day, instead of that having 2 or 3 feedings that are smaller every day, so there's a more consistent, continual food source, that will, in a way, trigger our fish to understand food is available so our babies can eat and survive. But by changing the quality of the food we're giving, especially if you can afford to do more frequent frozen food, or you can more actively culture your own live foods. Master Breeder Dean and Ryan both are regularly hatching live baby brine. I know that Ryan actually keeps a culture of blackworms of his own, so he's constantly actually making his own blackworms rather than buying them to feed the adults, because that helps them have a really good diet to trigger them to spawn. Master Breeder Dean has things like he's done paramecium in the past. I know that he has active vinegar eel cultures. Folks like Gary Lang have talked about using things like Daphnia and some of your like microworms or vinegar eels. But all these live foods just have a better natural nutritional quality than even some of the very, very best prepared foods out there. And you could name an arsenal of different great foods that are out there. Your personal fan favorites, you got me, I'm a big fan of Extreme, but there's New Life Spectrum or Kent's Fish, or, there's tons of great stuff out there. Northfin, for those of you folks who are up in Canada, I know Northfin's very popular up there. But none of that compares to live and frozen food as far as the nutritional quality is concerned for our fish. This is the kind of stuff they would eat in the wild. Things like bugs, all sorts of microcrustaceans and naturally occurring stuff in the water system that is outside of what, we would be able to create reliably inside a tank. Scuds for your bigger fish, right? As you start getting to adult fish, scuds are fantastic. And there's a similar parallel in a lot of our more veggie or algae eating fish, and using things like zucchini or pumpkin or any green beans, like all the things that we feed a lot of our bristlenose plecos. There's a difference in feeding them that reliably versus feeding them even something really good like Repashy. The nutritional quality is just significantly better when we're giving them higher and higher quality foods, closer to what, we would expect to eat for ourselves. We don't necessarily want to eat, potato chips all day long. If it comes to trying to be healthy and hearty and producing babies, we probably need something with some good nutritional quality to it, right? So it's the same for our fish, giving them higher quality food. Another big thing that almost all your breeders are going to tell you is water quality. Water quality, water quality, water quality, right? It's king for a lot of fish. It really is. And there are ways that you can trigger certain things based on how you do your water changes, but almost every person out there is going to tell you water change regularly and often frequently. And things like your plecos, right? They want those cold water changes. So there's that big water change of much cooler water. It's triggering rainfall. That works for Corydoras too. Rainbows are just give me any water change you could ever give me. But even our things like your guppies and stuff like that, they appreciate fresh, clean water. And the more frequent that we are doing those things, not to excess naturally, but the better the water quality we're going to give our fish, the more likely they are going to be in optimum health. And if we're feeding them really good food to boot, then you're more likely to get them breeding. I had a question pretty recently asking me about why their Praecox rainbows weren't breeding. And there's a number of different things. And we could basically ask those kind of couple of things is, what's our water quality like? How often are we water changing? And what kind of food are we feeding? Those are some of our biggest ones. But then one of the most important critical rules also becomes, do they feel safe? Often we'll see a lot of our breeders who have smaller tanks, and maybe they've got a ton of 20s or 10s or whatever it may be, depending on the fish they keep. But you'll see a black painted back or some kind of dark back, and maybe even the sides too, because it makes the fish feel like they've got more protection around them instead of being completely open. Now, me personally, I grew up in the 80s and 90s when you didn't really have so many painted background takes, and it was glass everywhere. You're just kind of used to that. So you look at a lot of my fish tanks, and they're generally up there more for display and keeping the fish, and they're more open because that's what I'm used to. But if we're trying to focus on breeding fish, and raising fry, we want to give that an environment where they feel more comfortable. So if you have things that are kind of like walls, effectively, to make them feel like they really only got to worry about predators from that one open pane of glass, they're a lot more likely to feel comfortable in their environment, and they're a lot more likely to spawn. Now, we can talk about plants at kind of the same time talking about spawning, because a lot of fish do fantastic when you've got a tank full of live plants. Look at these thick noodles behind me. They're just lounging in that Java fern, right? They're just easy peasy, lemon squeezy in there. They're happy as can be, but that happens to a lot of our fish because it gives them cover. It provides them refuge, a place where they can feel if there is a predator, they can go hide and be safe. That's important for a lot of our fish. So very often, if we have fish that maybe aren't as comfortable, you're not seeing optimum color, fake or live plants can help because they offer semblance of refuge and places for your fish to hide, so that when they are out and about, they will feel more comfortable knowing, like, hey, my safe place is just right over there. It's not far away. So just in case some big scary predator comes, I got a place to hide and I know I'm going to be safe. So they'll be out, more happy, more colorful. And if we combine that with all the other factors, even better, right? These are things that I've learned over my time, especially from breeders, because that's the one thing that I want to become better at, is breeding fish. Now, I'm thankfully either very, very lucky or relatively good with plants, but I've learned a lot from my failures. And that comes to a ton of lessons, and they're very similar. Giving better water quality to our plants. And in that sense, it kind of means having kind of continuous nutrients available. Giving good light to our plants. That doesn't necessarily mean super powerful light or the most expensive light. It just means the light that they want or need for a good period of time that is consistent. More like our normal day cycle, when that big glowing orb in the sky is out. It's out for a certain period of time, for a certain amount of time. You've got your sunrises and your sunsets, all these things that happen because of the wonderful world of nature. But we kind of need to think about those same things when it comes to our plants in order to make them happy. Are they only getting light for like 4 hours a day and your plants are struggling? Maybe they need more light. Or is your light on for like 12 hours because you turn it on in the morning and then you don't turn it off until you kind of remember it really late at night before you go to bed? Get a timer on that thing, make it more consistent. Bring that light down a little bit so that you're controlling it, and you might not have as much algae breaking out in your tank, or you might not see holes in your plants because they don't have enough nutrients to go with the amount of light they have available, so they're over photosynthesizing, if you will. That's not exactly what's happening, but just kind of think of it lightly like that way. It's like if you're exercising way too much, but not getting in enough food and water, you would cause problems to yourself. It's kind of similar with plants. If you're not getting algae, but you're having other issues, one of the things might be too much light or too long a period of light, right? These are little things that are environmental changes that, similar to how we keep our fish, will impact our plants. Just like you want to provide those good water changes in water quality, right? That matters for fish. We want to make sure that we have nutrients available for our plants, and the other things that they need inside the water are present for when and how often they need them, but not to excess. No matter how good your food is, if you feed your fish too much food, it's going to cause problems. Usually it'll cause an ammonia spike or some kind of big phosphate spike. You get algae everywhere, whatever it may be. It's very similar with plants. If you put too much good stuff in the water, if you're AM/PM and you're too much good stuff, you're going to have problems. You're probably going to end up with algae, or maybe it'll impact your fish's health. These are things we need to examine for the people that do very, very well and learn those lessons and apply them in our own aquariums, right? I've talked a couple of times about how I think the most important lesson you could ever learn in fish keeping is patience. It's more important than any other thing. But once you start mastering patience, then you can slowly work on some of those other things that continue to ratchet up your ability and your knowledge as a fish keeper. And that, my friends, is what I am hoping a video like this, where we just have a kind of a good open discussion and we talk about my failings and the lessons I've been observing very recently, especially and things that I want to apply with my fish going forward so that I can steadily get better and better at having happier, healthier fish, fish that live longer, fish that breed more baby fish, because baby fish are adorable. Those are the things that I want to work on for myself. What I would love to hear in the comments down below is, what do you want to work on? What are the things in your hobby that you want to get better at? And maybe even, who have you been learning from to help you start working toward getting better at that thing? I would love to hear that in the comments down below. If you enjoy videos like this, please consider giving it a little like, maybe even share it around. That's like the free way to help your local little YouTubers out, all your favorite YouTubers. Honestly, it's the best way to help us. It feeds that YouTube algorithm, gives a little bit of tickle, the whole pop of YouTube up there, tells them, hey, I like what this crazy fat guy is doing. Maybe you should tell more people about him. As always, my friends, thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome.